Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. The show's just about to get started. I'm going to go make my espresso, and we'll get the show going. Don't go anywhere.
From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. I'm obviously not in the studio on the road this morning, but really excited to bring you this morning's episode because we've got a busy show today, as every show, and I've got an espresso this morning on the road, which is, again, I try to book hotels with an espresso machine in the room. So when I do the show, I can still do my coffee cup cheers. Plus, I'm addicted to espressos. So give me an espresso. Can you tell I've had a bunch of this morning already? Because I'm going really, really fast. But let's slow it down a little bit. Let's groove into this Tuesday, July 11th, 2023, where Russia is targeting NATO summit. I predicted it yesterday. News came right after I said it. Russia's going to go after the NATO summit going on today and tomorrow. We'll talk about that, as well as an Apple urgent patch and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let's get started on this morning's show. But before we do that, join me for a cup of coffee, whatever you're drinking this morning. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. Oh, yeah. Let's get the show going.
There is a security breach.
So HCA Healthcare on Monday announced that the PII of roughly 11 million patients was stolen in a recent data breach. The healthcare service provider says this was discovered on July 5th after a threat actor posted on an underground forum information allegedly stolen from HCA Healthcare. The threat actor posted a list containing names, addresses, birth dates, gender information, phone number, email addresses, service dates, appointment dates, according to the incident notice. The investigation is ongoing, and they can't confirm the number of individuals whose information was actually impacted. HCA believes that the list contains approximately 27 million rows of data that may include information for approximately 11 million patients. The information was extracted from an external storage location exclusively used to automate the formatting of email messages. According to the healthcare service provider, clinical information, payment information, and other sensitive information like passwords, social security numbers, and driver's license number was not stolen in the attack. According to databreaches.net, however, the criminals claim to be in possession of emails containing health diagnostics that correspond to a client ID. HCA Healthcare also says that it disabled user access to the compromised storage location immediately after discovering the data breach, and it's found no evidence of any malicious activity on its networks or systems. There's been no disruption to care or services. That's great. They've informed law enforcement, and being one of the largest healthcare providers in the U.S., they operate 180 hospitals and over 2,300 ambulatory sites of care across 20 states and the UK. So we'll see more about this one as time goes along. If you're an Apple user, you may want to go ahead and get your stuff patched immediately, Apple releasing a rapid security response update to iOS, iPadOS, and macOS, as well as the Safari web browser to address a zero-day flaw that it said has been actively exploited in the wild. The WebKit bug catalog, the CVE 2023-37450, could allow threat actors to achieve arbitrary code execution when processing specially crafted web content. The iPhone maker said it addressed the issue with improved checks. Credited with discovering and reporting the flaws, an anonymous researcher. As with most cases like this, there are scant details about the nature and the scale of the attacks, but Apple noted in the advisory that it's aware of a report that this issue may have been actively exploited. Don't put this too far from other stuff. They've also pulled the software update after reports emerged that installing the patch caused certain websites like Facebook, Instagram, and Zoom to throw an unsupported browser error on Safari. So there's that. My guess is this is probably spyware related more than anything malicious. Critical infrastructure services provider Ventia over the weekend announced that it has taken some of its systems offline due to an active cyber attack. Ventia provides long-term management, maintenance, and operation services for critical infrastructure organizations and for private entities across the defense, electricity, gas, environmental services, and water industry. The company says it operates more than 400 sites in Australia and New Zealand with a combined employee base of over 35,000 employees. In an incident on Saturday, the company announced it decided to take some key systems offline in response to the incident. It has engaged with external experts and law enforcement to investigate. As they work to restore our networks, we'll prioritize security and safety of our people, customers, and stakeholder, the company says. They haven't shared details on the impact of the incident, but has issued an updated statement on Sunday saying that its operations are continuing while monitoring its network for any abnormal activities. Although the company didn't share specifics on the incident, it's possible that a file encryption ransomware was involved in the attack, although that's still not available. VMware is also warning of the exploit available for critical vRealize RCE bugs. VMware now issued an additional warning that exploit code is now available for a critical vulnerability in the VMware ARIA operations for log analysis, which helps admins manage terabytes worth of app and infrastructure logs in large-scale environments. The Flaw CVE 2023-20864 is a deserialization weakness patched in April. It does allow an unauthenticated attacker to gain remote execution on unpatched appliances. Successful exploitation enables threat actors to run arbitrary code as root following low-complexity attacks that don't require user interaction. VMware has confirmed that the exploit code for CVE 2023-20864 has been published, and it should be prioritized for patching. Recently, VMware also issued another alert about a now-patched critical bug, CVE 2023-20887, in VMware ARIA's operations for network, formerly vRealize Network Insight, allowing remote command execution as the root user and being actively exploited in attacks. This also added the flaw to its KEV catalog and ordered federal agencies to get it patched no later than Thursday of this week. So you've got that on your head as well. An interesting article at CSO Online. So I don't typically always bring stories from there, but this one really kind of had me a bit startled because it's really going after mismanaged cloud resources. So it's called it's called Scarleteel 2.0, which is deploying evolved tools and technique to obfuscate the exfiltration of stolen container credentials. It's an advanced operation discovered by cybersecurity intelligence firm Sysdig in February of this year. It's entered phase 2 with the evolved infection and exfiltration tactics. In its most recent activities, as noted by research, the operation was found targeting cloud environments with tools and techniques adapted to bypass new security measures, along with a more resilient and stealthy command and control architecture. The combination of automation and manual review of the collected data makes this attacker a more dangerous threat, according to the report. That isn't just nuisance malware like a Cryptominer is often thought of. They're looking at as much of the target environment as they can. Recent Scarleteel activities have targeted environments like AWS Fargate and Kubernetes, including a clear evolution not just from crypto mining to also further exploits such as stealing IP. And in recent attacks where they've seen these guys exploiting a minor mistake in an AWS policy to escalate privileges to administrator access, gain control over the Fargate account. It was also seen targeting Kubernetes through a similar TTP. The customer made an error that allowed the attacker to bypass one of their policies because of a single character typo, according to threat research engineer Alessandro Brucato. Specifically, this policy prevented attackers from taking over every user containing admin in their username, but the field used in the policy is case sensitive. Brucato added that one of the admin's username in the customer account started with admin, allowing the attacker to take control of it. This allowed the attacker to exploit some Jupyter Notebook containers deployed in Kubernetes clusters, which further enabled them to proceed with multiple types of attacks, primarily for stealing AWS credentials to further exploit the victim's AWS environment. The goal is to gain persistence in a vulnerable Kubernetes workload in order to elevate privileges and ultimately cause financial damage through either cryptojacking as well as intellectual property theft, according to Jimmy Masta, CTO at Kubernetes Security Operations Center. One vulnerable web application, or in the case of a Scarleteel, a Jupyter Notebook, can lead to a complete AWS compromise. So these scripts are used in the info stealing attacks. They seemed aware of being in a Fargate hosted container and executed relevant commands to collect these credentials. So this is a really good read and something worth auditing in your environment, really worth auditing in your environment. And finally, we go to Russia. We go to Russia and NATO. So NATO is coming together in Vilnius, Lithuania, for a summit on the war in the Ukraine, including the admittance of Sweden and potentially Ukraine into NATO. Now, there's a whole bunch of going on around the Ukraine application. It's expected Sweden will join NATO in this one. I don't think Ukraine will. There's consequences to Ukraine joining NATO, which at that point, any attack by Russia on Ukraine would be considered an Article 5 violation, which would essentially lead to World War III. Well, I said yesterday the Russians are going to go after this NATO summit in cyber capabilities in an unprecedented manner that they've never done before. And little did I know how much my prediction was going to come true. RomCom has been targeting entities supporting Ukraine, including some of the guests at the 2023 NATO summit taking place in Vilnius. Taking advantage of the event, RomCom has created malicious documents likely to be distributed to supporters of the Ukraine and appears to have dry tested its delivery on June 22nd, and a few days before the CNC domain used in the campaign went live, according to BlackBerry. The threat actor likely relies on spear phishing to distribute one of the malicious documents, relying on an embedded RTF file and an OLE object to initialize an infection chain meant to harvest system information and to deliver RomCom remote access Trojan. At one stage in the infection chain of vulnerability in Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool, CVE 2022-30190, known as Felina's exploited. According to BlackBerry, the CNC domains and victims' IP identified during this campaign were well accessed from a single server, which has been observed connecting to the RomCom infrastructure. Based on the nature of the upcoming NATO summit and the related lure documents sent out by the threat actors, the intended victims are representatives of the Ukraine, foreign organizations, and individuals that support the country. So we'll see more of that today and tomorrow, and we'll likely see significant attacks in the coming days using this NATO summit for Russia to gain access into kind of the thinking across different European countries and their foreign ministries and NATO in general. Not everyone in NATO supports the admittance of Ukraine into NATO. And so we'll see how that kind of plays out. This is a very critical time for NATO and for the world. Essentially, we could be on the verge of a greater military conflict that impacts a whole lot of other countries beyond just Russia and the Ukraine at the moment, and the conflict that's going on there, into a more full-fledged war. So there's that as well. So stay tuned to the NATO summit today and tomorrow. It's going to have a lot going on there. That's it for our show today. We'll be back tomorrow with a whole lot more. We're on the road. Thank you all for tuning in this morning. Really appreciate it. We're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to follow us. Until then, have a great rest of your day, y'all, and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.